Hi, I'm Marienthal, and welcome to Tricks of the Trade. I want to thank you very much for getting this video, and I hope you get a lot out of the things that I'm planning to show you. This is a very interactive video in the sense that I'm going to be doing a lot of playing, and you're going to be doing a lot of playing as well. During the course of this video, we're going to be going over some ideas and licks for soloing, how to incorporate more rhythm in your playing. We're going to learn some trick licks, as I call them, and some high note licks as well. How to get a good growling sound when you want to, and how to use multiphonics on high notes and that split tone sort of a sound. And some tips on playing in front of an audience. So get your horns out and let's get ready to learn some tricks of the trade. Out of all the clinics I've ever done, or out of all the students who have ever come over to my house, I think the most frequently asked question of me is, can you teach me some licks? Now, a player might practice for 8 hours a day till they're blue in the face, and it's very important to practice a lot of technique, but it's also very helpful to have some ideas under your belt as far as soloing and playing in a band. What I've done for this first part of the video is record 5 different tracks, and each of these tracks deals with a different chord or a chord progression. And for each of these progressions, I've written a solo, essentially, that we're going to learn from start to finish and then pick apart and learn certain licks out of. So, let's get started. Okay, this first track we're going to work with deals with major 7 chords. Now, it's very important. I'm sure you're going to hear me say it's very important at least 100 times during the course of this video, so you might want to get used to it. But it is very important to make sure that you know all of your major scales. Number one, so much of music is based on major scales. And number two, this track that I've recorded deals with major 7 chords in every key. What I want to do for you now is to play through this solo over the progression that you see in your booklet, and the solo as well you see. So follow along as I play this and give you an idea of what it sounds like. Okay, now it's probably not the greatest idea in the world to go into an improvising situation having your solo completely contrived. Number one, you're not really improvising that way, and number two, it's going to end up sounding very contrived. But it's a good idea to have some ideas going into a solo that you might want to use. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, and what I'm going to have you do in a minute, is that I'm going to play this whole solo one more time from start to finish. But this time I'm only going to play certain licks out of the solo and improvise around them. The point is that whether I'm playing a lick that I know I'm going to be playing or something that I'm just going to be making up, you want to make sure that both fit into the rhythm section and feel good time-wise. Okay, well, let me give you an example of what I mean. Well, here's where the interaction of the video comes in. Now it's your turn to play. What you might want to do is turn your machine off or put it on pause for a bit, work on the solo, and then what's going to happen now in the video is that the track is going to play by itself for a few choruses, a bit longer than what you just heard, without me. So you can play it much like a music -1 type of a record or CD. The first time you play through it, play my entire solo from start to finish, and the next time do what I just did, which is to pick out certain licks from the solo and then improvise around them. And each time you do this, pick out a different lick or different series of licks from my solo and improvise around those. Okay, have fun. Okay, this next track deals with a progression of minor 7 chords. The progression, as you can see, is a 16-bar progression. The first 8 bars is D minor 7 concert, followed by 4 bars of E flat minor 7 concert, and then 4 bars of D flat minor 7 concert. You know, one of the fun things about playing over minor chords is that not only can you derive your notes of your solo from the various minor scales, but you can also use notes from the minor pentatonic scale, which is root, flat 3rd, 4th, 5th, flat 7th, and octave. I've tried to incorporate notes from all those different scales in the solo that I've written over this progression, so follow along in your book as I play through this one. Okay, well, between these licks and the licks that we went over during the major chord exercise, I think there may be some things that you can use. Of course, we have quite a few more to come, so stay tuned. Anyway, I'm going to do what I did before, which is to play the solo, and as I do, rather than play the whole thing verbatim, I'm going to pick out certain licks of the solo and then improvise around those. Then I'm going to have you do the same thing in just a bit. So follow along as I give you an example of what I wanted you to do. All right, well, you have the routine down by now, I'm sure. What I want you to do is learn this solo. Go ahead and put your machine on pause like we did before. Once you've played the whole solo through the upcoming track, go ahead and work on certain licks and incorporate them into your solo. Make sure that whether you're playing one of my licks or one of your licks, that they all feel good and fit in comfortably with the rhythm section. Okay, go for it. Okay, now it's time to play the blues. I'm sure if you've ever gone to a jam session, as I have, you show up to the stage and everybody's trying to figure out what tune to play. If nobody can figure out a tune to play, somebody inevitably will yell out, "Let's play a blues." So I have written a progression, just a standard 12-bar progression over some typical dominant chords for this next track. And for this track, you guessed it, I wrote a solo, 3 choruses of this blues progression. So follow along in your booklet as I play my solo. Okay, you're probably figuring out at this point, and wisely so, that it's a good idea to write out some solos over some tunes that you're playing. When I was in high school, I had the great opportunity to study with the wonderful tenor saxophone player Warren Marsh. And Warren gave me this idea as far as writing out a solo for tunes that I was working on. So for each lesson, he would have me write a solo, a different chorus on a different tune, 1 solo per day. So every week I'd show up to his lesson and with 7 solos in my hand, and we go over them, and it was just a really good help as far as working on improvisation. Okay, well, I want to play through my solo one more time, and yes, you got it. I'm going to play my solo, and however, I'm just going to play certain licks out of the solo and then improvise around those. Once again, whether you're playing some of these licks or licks that you're making up on your own, make sure that they all feel comfortable and fit right into the rhythm section. Okay, here we go. Okay, well, it's back to you. Now it's your turn to play along with the track without me. So I want you to learn my solo from start to finish. Go ahead and put the machine on pause once again if you want to. Then turn the machine back on, and the track will play once again quite a few choruses of the blues so you can get into it for a while. Play my solo down from start to finish, and then play once again, playing certain licks out of my solo, and then incorporate your own licks over the ones from mine that you're not going to play. You're going to see my solo once again along with the changes in your booklet, so go ahead and read there, and you'll see the chord changes, a chord chart on the screen as the track is going by. So, have fun. Okay, another very often asked question of me during lessons is, can you teach me some licks over 2-5-1 progressions? And what I usually tell my students is that it's simple in the sense that the 2 and the 5 chord are related diatonically to the 1 chord. So you can play the same scale over all 3 chords. What makes your lines more interesting is that if you incorporate the strong part of each chord in your lines as you play through the 2-5-1 progression. That's what I try to do in this solo over my 2-5-1s that we're going to play over now. The progression runs in 2-5-1s that each repeat once. So you hear each 2-5-1 twice. And then they descend in half steps. And by doing that, they keep going until we've gone through all 12 keys. So let me play my solo for you now. You might want to sit back and get a little comfortable because this may take a little while. Okay, I think the best piece of advice I can give you is that when you improvise, it's the same as writing a melody in your head. You're actually writing a song, so in the same sense that you're writing music, you're also using space. Out of all the years that I've played with Chick Corea, I think his greatest piece of advice whenever I'd ask him what to play over certain changes was to, number one, make sure you use some space. I'm not quite sure what he was trying to tell me with that, but anyway, it was good advice. So what I want to do for you now is to play my solo once again, and yes, you've got it. I'm going to play certain licks and then improvise around those. So, and of course, I'm going to have you do the same thing. So let me give you an example of what I'm having you do. I'm now going to turn it over to you. The next thing you're going to hear, once again, will be the same track. The progression is going to repeat 2 or 3 times, so follow along out of your booklet. Make sure you play the whole solo first, so learn it, then play it along with the track, then pick certain licks out of the solo. Again, you want to make sure that it's fitting in nicely with the rhythm section, and each time you play through the solo, try to pick out different licks and incorporate those into your own solo. All right, good luck. Well, next time you go to a jam session, if they don't call a blues, very often the next most common tune will be something written over rhythm changes. And so I've written a solo over these changes. I chose this particular set of chord changes because it incorporates the 4 different changes in chord progressions that we've talked about so far. Major, minor, dominant, and 2-5-1s. One thing about rhythm changes that sometimes makes it a bit perplexing to play over is that the changes go by pretty quickly, and if you start falling behind a little bit, you might get lost in the dust. So anyway, let me play through the solo for you as you follow along in your booklet. All right, I want to thank my good buddy Dave Witham, great keyboard player from LA, who helped me record and sequence these tracks. Sound pretty good. Okay, well, I'm going to now play the same solo. I'm going to have you do the same thing, so pay attention. Same solo, and I'm going to pick out certain licks to play, and I'm going to improvise over others. So, and as I play along, I'm going to really be concentrating half on what I'm playing and half on the rhythm section. And I'm really going to make sure that what I play fits right in time-wise and harmonically to what the rhythm section is playing. And I want you to do the same thing. So let me give you an example. All right, well, once again, it's back to you. The track is going to play for quite some time, 3 or 4 choruses, so have fun with this. Make sure you get into the solo, and once you've played the whole solo with the track, pick apart certain licks and play it with your own improvisation. Okay, have fun. Having good rhythm in your solo is just as important as having good melodic content in your solo. You could be playing some of the greatest melodies ever heard, but if it's not fitting in rhythmically with the rhythm section, it's still not going to feel quite as good. For this part of the video, I want you to have 2 tools. Number 1, I want you to have a metronome, and number 2, a tape recorder. What I'm going to do is play with my metronome. I'm going to set it at a comfortable tempo. I've got mine set at 120, but you want to be varying your speeds as you do this exercise. And I'm going to try to create a groove rather than just playing exercises. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very important to always use your metronome no matter what you're playing or what you're practicing. But for this, I'm going to try to create a certain groove. I'm going to play like an even eighth note R&B kind of a groove, so the eighth notes are sort of a duple feel. And the point is that if I can create a good rhythmic feel with just using the very stark clicks of a metronome, then certainly when it comes time to play in a band, it's going to feel very, very good. So let me give you an example of what I want you to do in a moment. Okay, now again, the idea is to be thinking half about what you're actually playing and half have your concentration on the metronome, or if you're playing in a band, on whatever's providing, you know, the time, the pulse. I always listen to the drums, either the overheads, the cymbals, or, you know, the backbeat of the snare. Anyway, now I'm going to change up my style and try to create a swing groove. So I want you to do the same thing. I'm going to change my tempo here on the metronome to make it a little bit slower, and I'm going to play at 112. So here we go. All right, so do that for a while. Again, really concentrate on the clicks of the metronome and think about how well you're locking in. To use tool number 2, your tape recorder, simply make sure that you're recording yourself as you play. You know, you're thinking about so many things when you're doing this exercise. You're thinking about creating a good sound, playing what notes to play, what rhythm to play them in, and you're thinking about the clicks of the metronome as well. If you record yourself while you play like this, you can simply listen back to the tape recorder and not concentrate on all these other things. You can put all of your attention on what's actually coming out of your instrument, and by doing so, you'll be able to pick out the things that may not have quite sounded as good as you like, and you can work on them. Okay, this next section of the video I very affectionately refer to as trick licks. What I've done is record yet another track. It's definitely an R&B-ish kind of a track. It's another 16-bar form, the first 8 bars of which are G7 concert, then it goes to 4 bars of B-flat 7 concert, and 4 bars of C7 concert. And as you can see in your book, I wrote 25 licks. I put them in solo context. It's basically a written solo, and I numbered each lick 1 through 25. Well, I'd like to play through the solo for you now and have you give a listen to what these trick licks sound like. Okay, well, let me give you a few pointers referring to a few of these licks. If you look in your book on number 14, I've got those trills marked over the first 3 quarter notes. And what I did was to, on each of those notes, just trill on my side high E key. So you can use that in a lot of different ways. Lick 17, I did the same thing. I just stayed on B and did that trill up to, well, basically sounds like D. It's a very popular one. And when you play that lick, actually, especially over minor chords or dominant chords, it sounds good to go from the 5th up to the flat 7th and make that sort of a trill. So if you're playing if I were playing in D7 or D minor, A to C natural sounds cool. And C, and so on. What's another one here? Oh, on lick, what is that? Lick 21, where I wrote the pluses over a few of those Fs. On the pluses, I'm using a overtone of low B flat. So on the ones that don't have a plus, I'm just playing normal B flat, and the pluses are an overtone of low B flat, and I've still got my octave key down. You can use that over all those low note overtones. For F sharp, you could do low B. And low C can give you the overtone of G. Like that. The rest are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to let the track run now by itself for quite a while, so you can have some fun with this. Make sure you learn the whole solo from start to finish, and then pick apart certain licks, and you got it. Use them in your own improvisation. All right, have fun with my trick licks. On my last DCI video called Modern Sax, I talked about how to play high notes, how to get a good sound on those notes, and the fingerings that I use. For this video, you've guessed it, I'm going to play and teach you some high note licks. Yes, indeed. Before we do, though, I want to go over some of the things that it takes to get a good sound on those high notes. Actually, the rules on getting a good sound up there are the same as getting a good sound on the rest of the horn. You want to follow the big 3 rules. Rule number 1 is that you want to make sure that your lip isn't bearing down too much on the reed. You want to play with as relaxed an embouchure as possible. The more the reed vibrates, the bigger your sound. Number 2, you want to make sure your throat is nice and open. The way to achieve that is to pretend like you're speaking in a very low voice. When you do that, your throat really opens up, and so try to assimilate that when you play. And number 3, use a lot of air and support from your diaphragm. You want to always be feeling as though you're pushing from your stomach, from your diaphragm, and pushing that air up into your horn. Okay, now what I want to do is close up on my saxophone. I want to show you some fingerings that I use for these altissimo notes. I'm going to start with the alternate fingering for high E. We all know the normal palm key fingering is this fingering. The fork fingering or plateau fingering is to use plateau high F and then the 2 and 3 fingers on the left hand. For the note F, you want to just lift up the G key and just use the plateau key and the number 2 key on your left hand. For F sharp, it's the same fingering, and now we're going to add the side side B flat, and that gives us our F sharp. For high G, still got my octave key down. Actually, I'm going to be using my octave key for all these fingerings. Anyway, the fingering for high G is 1 and 3 on the left hand and 1 and 3 on the right hand. For G sharp, I've got the same fingering as G, and I'm going to add side C over here. For high A, it's 2 and 3 in the left hand and 1, 2, 3 in the right hand. Actually, the right hand is optional. Sometimes the note comes out a little bit easier when you just use 2 and 3 in the left hand. The sound of the note is actually much bigger. However, if you give it the long fingering, which incorporates 1, 2, 3 in the right hand. As far as high B flat goes, 2 different fingerings there as well. You can play simply the overtone of high C sharp. It sounds actually better and much more in tune if you press down the G key, the number 3 key in your left hand. It locks the pitch in better. For high B, I use the overtone of side D, still with this G sharp G key down. For high C, it's the overtone of side E flat, the normal high 3 ledger line E flat, still with this down here. For high C sharp, I use the overtone of E, and for high F, or high D rather, I use the overtone of either the overtone of high F or just fork F right here. So let me play those for you right now. Okay, now it's time for my high note licks. What I've done here is very similar to what I did over my trick licks, actually. We're going to play over the same track. It's going to play for you after I'm done demonstrating these licks. What I did was to write an entire solo of high note licks. I'm going to see if I can make my way through this entire solo and have you follow along. All right, well, go ahead and play through these licks. Now, obviously, if you were to play the entire solo down from beginning to end, number one, would it sound a little monotonous, and you might get a few dogs barking at your front door, but you also may put a hole in your lip, so be very careful when you practice this. Go ahead and play the whole solo if you want, but more importantly, take certain licks out of this solo that you may be able to incorporate in your own solo. All right, have fun with this one. Okay, let me talk about 3 different ways that you can get a good growling sound. Number 1, you can actually do a flutter tongue kind of effect where you do that kind of a thing against the tip of the mouthpiece. Number 2, you can actually sing into the horn as you play. You want to sing rather loud, I suppose, to get enough air to get the horn to sound. What I do is I actually let a little air escape from the side of my mouth and buzz the side of my mouth to get the same effect. Let me show you what I mean. Well, when I do that, you can probably, when it's just one-on-one and I'm not playing with anybody else, you can probably hear a little bit of that air escaping. I can assure you, though, when you're playing with a band, you really can't hear that so much. Even when you're playing on a record recording, you can't hear it so much. What you can hear does add to the overall effect of the growl, and it sounds kind of cool. As far as adding multiphonics and getting that split tone sort of a sound on some high notes, the way to achieve that is actually by breaking a few of the good tone rules that I was talking about earlier. What you want to do, first of all, is to bring a little bit of your lip down the reed. Now, I don't mean to bring the mouthpiece into your mouth a whole ton, just to roll your lower lip down the reed and then bear down on the heart of the reed with your lip, rather than being relaxed like we were talking about earlier. At the same time, you want to kind of bring your horn back and have your air skirt across the top of the mouthpiece rather than go straight in. And number 3, you want to blow like mad. Just blow as hard as you can and overblow. I mean, don't blow as hard as you can, but really use a lot of air. Let me try to demonstrate this for you. That was on F sharp. Let me try it on G. All right, well, have fun practicing that one. Okay, now let me talk about some tips as far as playing in front of an audience is concerned. I'm convinced that there's no way to really try, quote unquote, to get the audience to like you. Your playing and your personality have to speak for themselves. If you go to a show and you see a guy performing and he's jumping all over the stage and going crazy doing backflips, you can tell if he's really doing it because he's into the music and really into creating a good show, or if he's just trying to impress the girl in the third row. There are some ideas I've thought of, both musically and visually, that might help you with communicating with an audience. Number 1 is to make sure that when you play, that you're playing with conviction. Once again, you can listen to a player play and really tell if he's playing with heart and soul or if he's just kind of going through the motions. To give you a little example, it'd be like, even if you're playing something kind of up high, but without a whole lot of heart in it, it might sound something like this. As opposed to really getting into it and really trying to communicate your line and your expression. It certainly is important when you're playing ballad melodies. Now, I'm just making these up, but let me give you an example of, a low, sultry sort of melody that's played without a whole lot of emotion or conviction. As opposed to now, the worst thing you can do is to over-emote. I mean, it's good to use scoops and bends and that sort of thing, but be very, very careful. In fact, it may not be a bad idea to record yourself when you're playing, to make sure that you're not using too many scoops or bends, or using tons of vibrato over everything. Make sure you're really in charge of what you're playing. Another very important thing is to make sure that you build your solos. If you start your solo on 10 and just plow through the whole solo just full blast, it's going to sound kind of monotonous, actually, to the audience and to the other guys in the band. Better idea is to make sure you build your solos. Start a little lower and build them up. That way the whole band will build with you. I'll give you a short example of that. a very abbreviated version of about a 4-minute solo, but you get the idea. Another thought I had was to make sure that you have communication going on between you and other members of the band. I know that in my band, the guitar player and I play off of each other quite a lot. We'll play a solo together where I'll play a lick and then he'll play a lick back, and we have this cool musical dialogue going on between us. Even if you're playing in a small group or a big band, the musical communication that goes on between you and the rhythm section is often a lot of fun to play, but it's also very great communicatively with the audience. If the piano player or the drummer plays something and you play off it, or vice versa, creates great communication, and really is a lot of fun. It makes the music really rise that way. One other thought I had as far as communicating musically is make sure that you don't play a solo with the same 2 or 3 licks over and over and over again. That also gets very monotonous. So make sure that when you play, you're really trying to be as diverse as possible, both rhythmically and musically with your phrases. Now, as far as communicating visually with an audience, I had a few ideas there too. Number one, you want to make sure that once in a while you actually look at the audience. As you may have noticed during the course of this video, I tend to play a lot with my eyes closed, and I have to remind myself to once in a while look up at the audience and actually make some eye contact. To use an analogy, if you were having a conversation with someone and as they talk to you, they actually never looked at you, and they're talking to you and they're talking to you and they're trying to tell you what a beautiful day it is out there, and yet you're not really getting much of a communication because they're never looking at you. So try to look at the audience as much as you can. Another thought I had too was to make sure that the audience knows that you're there to play for them. We've all walked into clubs and listened to bands, and within the first 5 minutes you can tell if the band is into what they're doing or they're just there to make their money. Again, well, I can relate a good story. I was playing in LA about 9 years ago in a club, and it really wasn't all that big of a gig or anything, and you know, I try to make it a rule to always play my best when I'm in a club. Well, sure enough, intermission came up, and up walked Chick Corea, and to my extreme surprise, he was impressed with my playing. He came up and actually sat in with us during the second half of the night. The next morning, I got a phone call from his manager asking me to play on his next record and to go on tour. So suffice to say, make sure you always play your very best whenever you're playing in public. Another thing that came to mind for me was to make sure that there is no visual impairment between you and the audience, such as a music stand. We all have to read music from time to time when we're playing on stage, but make sure that the stand isn't up at eye level so that the audience only sees your legs and your torso and a big stand. Make sure you have the stand nice and low and off to the side so you can still read the music, but the audience can see you. As far as the other members of the band are concerned, too, the same thing. As far as music stands or mic stands, make sure that the guys aren't set up behind each other so somebody can't be seen, or behind a pillar or something. Lastly, I think the most important thing is just to make sure that you're always at ease on stage, or as much as possible. Again, referring back to Chick Corea, we've been playing for a number of years now. We played all over the world in front of many, many different audiences and unusual places, and playing all kinds of music. And whatever we're doing and wherever we are, whatever we're playing, Chick is always amazingly at ease. And you can tell that when the audience sees someone play with that kind of confidence and that kind of ease, they feel at ease listening to the music, and they enjoy it much, much more. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking this time with me, and I really hope you've learned a lot of things that you'll be able to use. Unfortunately, there are no shortcuts when it comes to music, but if you put the time and effort in it takes to be a great musician, the rewards will be well worth it, especially if you know some of the tricks of the trade. Thanks a lot, take it easy, and God bless.